Silence hung in the air like a heavy curtain at Clarence's house as the door creaked open. Meghan Markle stepped out, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on the ground ahead, as if trying to walk away from a storm that was only just beginning to gather. The woman once hailed as a breath of fresh air in the royal family now appeared anything but invigorated. Behind her, voices still murmured, some angry, some resigned. But one thing was clear. Something irreversible had just occurred within those royal walls. This was no routine meeting. This wasn't another polite gathering of royal minds to discuss charity events or state affairs. No, this was something far more seismic, something personal. And for Meghan Markle, it marked the end of a long, controversial, and defiant journey inside the world's most scrutinized monarchy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what exactly happened? Why did the woman who once held the coveted title of Duchess of Sussex suddenly find herself stripped of relevance, pushed to the royal periphery? And perhaps most shocking of all, why is Zara Tindall, the Queen's beloved granddaughter, the one now stepping into the spotlight Meghan left behind? This is not just a story of royal titles. It's a tale of betrayal, legacy, hidden ambitions, and a family's fight to redefine itself in the wake of chaos. A monarchy wounded by scandal, rocked by rebellion, and now forced to reckon with its own bloodline. And in the center of this storm stands King Charles, torn between his sons, burdened by history, and desperate to steer the crown into calmer waters. The story that's unfolding isn't just another chapter in the royal saga. It's a battle for the soul of the House of Windsor. To understand the full magnitude of what's happening now, we must go back. Before the whisperings at Buckingham, before the leaked emails, and before Zara Tindall ever considered exchanging her quiet life for a title she once publicly declined. The relationship between Meghan Markle and the British royal family has always walked the line between hope and heartbreak. When she married Prince Harry in 2018, the public was sold a fairy tale, an American actress finding love with a prince, stepping into a 1,000-year-old institution with grace and optimism. But fairy tales, as we've learned, often hide thorns behind their roses. From the start, Meghan was unlike any royal before her. She was outspoken, unapologetic, and modern in a way that clashed, violently at times, with the Crown's deeply ingrained tradition of never complain, never explain. What followed was a whirlwind of media frenzy, tabloid battles, and family strife that quickly unraveled into a historic royal exit in 2020, forever dubbed Megxit. The Queen, still alive at the time, handled the storm with her characteristic grace, but even she couldn't deny that damage had been done. Meghan and Harry's departure from official duties sent shockwaves not just through the palace walls, but around the globe. And while their public statements painted a picture of peace and personal freedom, those inside the firm knew better. There was unfinished business, lingering resentment, and a sense of betrayal that never quite healed. Fast forward to the present. King Charles now sits on the throne, and the monarchy is in a state of reinvention. With the Queen gone, there is no longer a singular matriarch to hold the family together with her quiet authority. Instead, the institution is at a crossroads, faced with dwindling public support, growing Republican sentiment, and the pressing need to modernize or risk becoming irrelevant. And then, against this backdrop, came Meghan's latest move. An alleged back-channel effort to re-enter royal life in a more ceremonial capacity. Not full-time, not day-to-day, but enough to keep the Sussex brand afloat and regain a foothold in the British public's consciousness. According to sources close to the palace, Meghan had begun floating the idea of making occasional appearances at royal events. For the good of the crown, she is reported to have said. But the crown didn't see it that way. King Charles, now burdened with more than just ceremonial duties, had a decision to make, one that would either bring unity or invite another storm. And so, in what palace insiders are calling the Sussex Resolution, the king made a quiet but firm decision. There would be no room for part-time royals. If Meghan wanted a seat at the royal table, it had to be all or nothing. Harry, reportedly blindsided by the move, tried to mediate, but it was already too late. The king had been watching, waiting, and weighing for years. Meghan's commercial deals, public appearances, and podcast interviews had all but made her incompatible with royal protocol. There was no undoing the image she had built, one that often appeared to contradict the quiet dignity expected of the Windsors. But what happened next shocked even the most seasoned royal watchers. Just as Meghan's presence was being formally severed, another name quietly emerged from the shadows: Zara Tindall. Zara, the daughter of Princess and granddaughter to Queen Elizabeth II, has always been something of a paradox, deeply royal by blood, but publicly separate from the pomp and politics of royal life. She never held a title. She never wanted one. She was the royal who chose horses over headlines, country life over court drama. And yet, in the midst of the Sussex fallout, Zara did something no one expected. She said yes. To what exactly? According to sources, yes, to becoming the new Duchess of Sussex. It was a stunning pivot, one that left palace courtiers reeling and royal watchers scrambling for explanations. Why now? Why her? And why a title that has become so synonymous with division and scandal? The answers lie not just in Zara's character, but in the monarchy's desperate need for redemption. In the aftermath of years of infighting, exiles, and PR disasters, the crown needed a figure who could restore faith without demanding attention. Someone familiar, trusted, and immune to the tabloid tornadoes that seemed to follow others. Someone like Zara. King Charles, reportedly encouraged by both Camilla and Princess Anne, approached Zara with the offer privately. It wasn't just about titles or duty. It was about restoring dignity to a role that had been dragged through global headlines and reducing the volatility within the family ranks. Zara's agreement, however, came with conditions. She would not be paraded or politicized. She would serve in her own way, at her own pace. And she would only accept the title if it came with the full blessing of the king and a clear boundary from the Sussex's legacy. Meanwhile, Meghan's final days as a working royal figure became a blur of missed calls, legal consultation, and quiet fury. Behind the scenes, friends say she felt ambushed, that her olive branch had been not only rejected, but used as a pivot to hand her former title to someone else. And what of Harry? Those close to him say this may have been his lowest moment yet. Caught between two worlds, his love for his wife and his longing for familial belonging. He was left voiceless as the monarchy moved forward without him. But the decision was made. The dominoes had fallen. As we sit here today, the Duchess of Sussex no longer resides in Montecito, at least not in name. That title, once the subject of documentaries, lawsuits, and late-night mockery, now belongs to a woman who never wanted the spotlight, but may be the monarchy's best hope for keeping it. And so, we ask the question, is this the ultimate royal redemption story? Or is it a cold-blooded chess move by a king desperate to protect the crown? By the end of this video, you'll hear the full story, every twist, every betrayal, every whispered deal that led to this moment. You'll understand why Meghan was forced out, why Zara stepped in, and what this means for the future of the royal family as we know it. Stay with us, because nothing about what's coming next is predictable. Not when royalty starts rewriting its own rules. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper, an unnoticed email, an unanswered invitation, a seat conspicuously unassigned at a royal event. Meghan Markle, once the glamorous outsider who briefly captured the heart of an institution, had begun to feel something no member of the royal family dares to feel: irrelevant. The corridors of the monarchy don't echo with loud confrontations, they speak in silence. And Meghan, from her hillside mansion in Montecito, was beginning to hear that silence louder than ever. According to insiders close to the royal apparatus, the final straw came during preparations for a high-profile royal initiative, an ambitious campaign King Charles planned to roll out across the Commonwealth in the following spring. It was meant to showcase a unified, modernized royal family, a force of stability and grace amidst global change. Behind the scenes, names were being assembled, roles assigned, and symbolic appearances meticulously planned. Prince William and Catherine, naturally, would lead the charge. Princess and the ever-dependable workhorse of the family would handle diplomatic visits. Even Edward and Sophie were slotted into soft power assignments. But conspicuously absent from the draft itinerary was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. At first glance, it seemed like an oversight. But for those familiar with the pulse of the palace, it was deliberate. King Charles had made a quiet but irrevocable decision. There would be no return for the Sussexes, not even in a symbolic sense. What had Meghan done to provoke such an unyielding response? After all, it wasn't the first time she had extended what appeared to be an olive branch. Earlier that year, reports had surfaced that Meghan was open to participating in select royal engagements, charity events, Commonwealth Day services, or even the occasional military remembrance gathering. It was presented as a gesture of goodwill, a way to rebuild bridges without compromising the independence she and Harry had fought so hard to secure. But behind the scenes, those offers were met with deep skepticism. For Charles, it wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about consistency, and the Sussexes had shown anything but. Since their dramatic departure from senior royal duties in 2020, Meghan and Harry had repeatedly spoken out against the institution that once embraced them. From the infamous Oprah interview to Meghan's podcast, their Netflix docuseries, and Harry's memoir, the damage was cumulative. Every revelation, every public jab, every insinuation of racism or emotional neglect compounded a fracture that could no longer be patched over. The final royal straw, according to an aide speaking anonymously, was a private deal Meghan allegedly attempted to secure with a major U.S. network. The program, pitched under the veil of uplifting narratives of marginalized voices, was to include segments touching on her personal experiences within the royal family. While no names were mentioned directly in the draft proposal, the implication was unmistakable. The royals were to serve, once again, as her backdrop of contrast, a foil to Meghan's journey of enlightenment and personal growth. This, for King Charles, was the betrayal he could no longer ignore. The monarchy, already reeling from public skepticism and global media scrutiny, could not afford to be used as a recurring narrative device for private commercial ventures. The message was clear: you cannot be part-time royalty and full-time brand. There were private calls, letters, communications through intermediaries. Harry pleaded for understanding. Meghan, reportedly, felt ambushed and humiliated, according to a close source. She believed her offers were genuine. In her view, a hybrid role, a sort of half-in, half-out arrangement, was not only possible but modern, reflective of the evolving times. But the crown doesn't operate in modern compromises. It operates in legacy, in permanence, in symbolism. And in that framework, Meghan's actions were not seen as progressive. They were seen as opportunistic. When King Charles summoned a council of senior advisors, including Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Princess Anne, the discussions were measured but firm. Camilla, never fond of Meghan and reportedly still stung by the implication that she had been one of the unnamed royal family members accused of questioning Archie's skin color, was unsparing. William, long at odds with his brother and his brother's wife, emphasized that allowing Meghan any foothold back into royal life would only invite another media circus. But the most surprising voice of agreement came from Princess Anne. Though she had long kept her distance from the Sussex drama and reportedly spoke bluntly, the monarchy, she said, needed fewer distractions, not more apologies. The Queen's passing had left a vacuum that couldn't be filled by ambiguity or sentimentality. The royal family needed clarity. It needed discipline. And so it was decided. Meghan's request or suggestion, depending on who you ask, would not only be declined. She would be quietly and formally severed from all remaining symbolic ties to her previous role. No more invitations to key events. No more allowances for shared charity initiatives. No more Sussex positioning within the framework of royal communications. But the decision wasn't complete without one final move, a symbolic replacement. That replacement was, astonishingly, Zara Tindall. It wasn't just about pushing Meghan out. It was about who would be brought in to redefine the role she left behind. And in the context of legacy, loyalty, and public trust, Zara represented everything the monarchy was desperately trying to hold on to. Meghan, meanwhile, received the news in the most royal way imaginable, not through a phone call, but through silence. An invitation she expected to arrive never came. A scheduled video conference between her and a palace liaison was quietly canceled. And then, a letter, formal, cold, deliberate, landed in the hands of her legal team. It explained that moving forward, all communications regarding royal matters should be directed through official channels. There would be no exceptions. The response, according to multiple sources, left Meghan in shock. She had believed there was still room for reconciliation. She had, perhaps naively, hoped that time had softened hearts. But the door hadn't just been closed. It had been sealed. And Harry? Those close to him say the news devastated him. For weeks, he had been working behind the scenes, speaking with aides, old friends, even cousins, trying to feel out whether there was a chance for a gentle reentry. In his heart, he believed the family could find common ground. But when the decision was finalized, he reportedly became withdrawn, even quiet. Some say he hadn't seen it coming. Others believe he had always known it was inevitable. What followed was a period of eerie quiet in Montecito. Meghan, once so present in the public eye, seemed to vanish from headlines. Events she had tentatively committed to were quietly dropped. Her PR team declined interviews. There were rumors she was considering a tell-all, but nothing materialized. Those who knew her say she was hurt, but more than that, she was angry. She had played by her own rules, only to be told that the game was over. But this wasn't just personal. This was institutional. And for King Charles, it marked a line in the sand. In private circles, some close to the king say he believed this move would come to define his early reign. Not the coronation, not the royal tours, but the decision to decisively close a chapter that had caused so much instability. It was about reclaiming authority, reasserting tradition, recentering the monarchy around figures who embraced duty over drama. And so, as the king prepared to quietly offer Zara Tindall the Duchess role once held by Meghan Markle, the royal family braced for the storm. Because they knew the world was watching, and the crown was once again at the heart of a battle between family and institution. The title Duke and Duchess of Sussex had always been more than a ceremonial designation. It was a brand, a symbol, and, in recent years, a lightning rod for controversy. From the moment it was bestowed upon Prince Harry and Meghan Markle by Queen Elizabeth II on the morning of their wedding in May 2018, the title carried with it an aura of modern royalty infused with centuries of British tradition. But within just a few years, it had transformed into something else entirely. Less a royal honor, more a badge of rebellion, resistance, and rebranding. What many forget is that the title of Duke of Sussex had remained dormant for nearly 2 centuries before Harry received it. The last Duke of Sussex was Prince Augustus Frederick, a son of King George III, who, ironically, was also a royal outlier. Augustus married twice, both times illegally under the Royal Marriages Act of 1772. His wives were never recognized by the crown, and he spent much of his life at odds with the rules of royal life. In an almost poetic twist, Harry, too, became a figure who defied the traditional expectations of his role, though in very different times and on a very different stage. When Queen Elizabeth handed the title down to Harry on his wedding day, it was meant to be a gesture of trust, approval, and integration. Meghan Markle, as the first woman of color to marry into the modern royal family, was entering an institution not known for its adaptability. The title Duchess of Sussex signified her welcome into that institution, her official place in the hierarchy, her commitment to serve. But the fairy tale soon fractured. The royal title that once adorned charitable appearances and formal banquets began appearing instead on headlines, lawsuits, and press releases linked to commercial ventures, political commentary, and streaming platforms. And that was where the trouble truly began. The core of the royal institution is built upon a simple, if rigid, premise. The crown is above politics, above business, above drama. Royals do not endorse products. They do not weigh in on political matters. They do not monetize their position. The moment a title begins to intersect with branding, profit, and partisan messaging, the institution sees red flags. The Sussexes, perhaps unintentionally, turned that premise upside down. Following their departure from royal duties in early 2020, Harry and Meghan insisted that they wished to carve out a progressive new role within the monarchy, one that would allow them to remain partly in the royal fold while pursuing their own financial independence. But Buckingham Palace, after weeks of delicate negotiations, made it clear, no part-time royalty. They would no longer use the HRH, Her Royal Highness, styling, though they would retain the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles in name only. At the time, this was presented as a compromise. But as the years wore on, the distinction became harder to defend. Meghan and Harry continued to be referred to by the Sussex title in interviews, articles, and media contracts. Their charitable foundation was named Archewell, but it was introduced to the public with a press release that opened from the office of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That alone raised eyebrows within the palace. To the Crown's more traditionalist thinkers, it appeared that the couple wanted the benefit of royal cachet without the burden of royal. For a time, this tension simmered quietly, beneath the surface, unacknowledged. But certain moments exploded into view. Meghan's children's book, The Bench, was marketed using her Duchess title. A Netflix documentary bearing their names promised to give an unprecedented look into the lives of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And Harry's memoir, while deeply personal, couldn't escape the weight of his royal status. All of this, in the eyes of Buckingham Palace, was the title being used as leverage in the global marketplace. This is what prompted renewed debate in 2023 and 2024 among senior royal advisors. Should the Sussex titles be removed entirely? It was not a decision to be made lightly. Stripping a title from a royal family member is rare, and when it happens, it sends shockwaves. The last high-profile instance was in 2022 when Prince Andrew lost his military titles and HRH styling amid the scandal surrounding his legal settlement related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. But even then, he retained his Duke of York title, leading many to question the selective application of royal punishment. With Harry and Meghan, the conversation was trickier. For one, their departure had been voluntary, on paper, at least. They hadn't committed a criminal act. They hadn't even directly violated royal protocols, though they had tested their limits to the extreme. Any move to revoke their titles risked looking vindictive. Yet the calls were growing louder, especially from within Parliament and the British public. In one particularly contentious session in the House of Commons, MP Bob Seely argued in favor of legislation that would allow the monarch, with parliamentary approval, to strip individuals of their titles in cases where the Crown's dignity was at stake. He didn't name names, but it was clear who the target was. Other lawmakers echoed the sentiment, pointing out the contradiction of allowing individuals who had publicly criticized the monarchy to continue profiting from its prestige. Inside the palace, King Charles was reportedly conflicted. On one hand, he had spent his entire life preparing for the throne, studying diplomacy and discretion with the intensity of a scholar. He understood the optics. On the other hand, he was a father, and for all their disagreements, Harry was still his son. The decision to remove the Sussex title wouldn't just be a royal decree. It would be a public severing of familial ties. But as more incidents piled up, including Meghan's alleged attempts to associate the title with new content ventures and business partnerships, the scales began to tip. The Crown's reputation was at stake. Worse still, there was now the risk of brand confusion. People around the world were associating the title Duchess of Sussex with entertainment, controversy, and commercialism. Not with the Crown. To protect the monarchy's image, a new idea emerged within Charles's inner circle. Don't eliminate the title, reassign it. This would not only neutralize the controversy, but also reclaim the title's dignity. And the perfect candidate was hiding in plain sight, Zara Tindall. Zara had royal blood, but no royal scandal. She had name recognition, but no headlines of disgrace. She had the Queen's favor and the public's respect. And most importantly, she had always been loyal without demanding recognition. To many inside the palace, she represented everything the monarchy now wanted to project: quiet strength, modern femininity, humility, and resilience. Of course, the title couldn't just be reassigned without formal process. A new duchess would require an Act of Royal Letters Patent, an official document issued by the monarch that could either create, assign, or reassign noble titles. Historically rare, this mechanism had been used most recently in 2012, when Queen Elizabeth II issued a letters patent allowing all of Prince William's children, not just his eldest son, to hold the title of prince or princess. The machinery was complex. The optics were sensitive, but the plan was underway. In Montecito, Meghan's reaction was one of disbelief. Sources say she considered legal avenues, but the palace had been cautious. They knew the limitations of U.S. law on British noble titles, and they had crafted their communications carefully. Meghan was informed that while she and Harry retained the dignity of the title in the peerage system, they would no longer be recognized as its public bearers. That space would now be filled by Zara and her husband, Mike Tindall. The public, for its part, responded with a mix of shock and approval. Social media erupted with divided camps. Some decrying the decision as cruel and politically motivated, others celebrating it as long overdue justice. Commentators and tabloids dissected every possible implication, even questioning whether Meghan would now go by a new moniker. Would she be Meghan Mountbatten Windsor again? Or perhaps just Meghan Markle? For royal historians, it was an unprecedented moment. Never before had a duchess been effectively replaced. The monarchy had navigated abdications, divorces, and constitutional crises, but this was something new, the quiet reassignment of status, not through disgrace, but through obsolescence. And still, Harry remained silent. Those close to him say the situation broke something inside, not just because of the title, but because of what it represented. The title had been a gift from his grandmother, the late Queen. It was a gesture of inclusion, of trust. To see it now repurposed, reassigned, and stripped of its original context felt like a disowning not just of Meghan, but of himself. But the monarchy was not built to preserve feelings. It was built to preserve itself. And in that context, the decision made perfect sense. The Sussex title, once a crown jewel of modern royal branding, was now in new hands. And as the dust began to settle, one truth became undeniable. The House of Windsor had reclaimed a piece of itself. For most of her life, Zara Tindall moved through the royal landscape like a ghost, visible, familiar, yet always just out of reach from the drama and rigidity of the crown. As the daughter of Princess and granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, Zara was born into royalty by blood but not by rank. She was raised without titles, grew up without the formality of palace life, and for years seemed perfectly content with that distance. She built her identity not on crowns and ceremonies, but on grit, discipline, and independence. So when news broke that Zara Tindall would be accepting the title of Duchess of Sussex, taking over the very title once held by Meghan Markle, it wasn't just surprising. It was revolutionary. Because this wasn't just about a title. It was about trust, redemption, and the royal family's last-ditch effort to redefine its image in the wake of years of scandal. To understand the weight of this moment, one has to understand who Zara Tindall is, and who she has never pretended to be. Born in 1981, Zara and Elizabeth Phillips entered the world not in a castle or surrounded by footmen, but in a hospital like any ordinary Briton. Her mother, Princess Anne, had declined the Queen's offer to bestow royal titles upon her children, insisting they grow up as normally as possible. It was a bold and, at the time, controversial decision, but it shaped Zara's world completely. From an early age, Zara displayed a fierce sense of individuality. While other royals attended state functions and media-scrutinized galas, Zara was mucking stables, riding horses, and immersing herself in the competitive world of equestrianism. She would go on to become one of Britain's most successful equestrian athletes, winning a silver medal at the 2012 London Olympics. But perhaps more telling than her achievements was her demeanor. Zara never wore her royal lineage on her sleeve. She didn't need to. Unlike many of her cousins and extended family, Zara avoided controversy with a kind of effortless grace. She married former rugby star Mike Tindall in 2011, in a wedding that was far more relaxed than the spectacle that surrounded William and Kate or Harry and Meghan. The couple lived in Gloucestershire, raising their children in a comparatively quiet life, making occasional appearances at major royal events without ever courting the spotlight. She was the royal family's secret weapon, loyal without being loud, popular without being polarizing, and public without being performative. But even loyalty has a price. And in recent years, that price had become clear to those inside the palace walls. Following Queen Elizabeth's death and King Charles's ascension to the throne, the royal family entered a state of reevaluation. The institution had been rocked by scandals involving Prince Andrew, shaken by the defiance of Harry and Meghan, and was quietly grappling with diminishing influence across the Commonwealth. Charles understood that the monarchy needed more than just stability, it needed reinvention. And so, Amidst the fallout of Meghan Markle's failed bid to re-enter royal life and the official severing of her symbolic royal ties, a new opportunity emerged, the chance to reclaim the Sussex title. But this time, the crown wouldn't gamble on novelty or celebrity. It would place its bet on trust. Zara, according to multiple royal insiders, was approached directly by her mother, Princess Anne, who had been in quiet consultation with King Charles for weeks. The proposal was carefully worded, respectful, and tentative. Would Zara, after all these years, consider stepping into a more visible royal role, not out of obligation, but out of necessity? At first, Zara reportedly declined. For her, life outside the palace had worked just fine. She had a family, a thriving equestrian business, and a public image unmarred by scandal. She didn't need a title to validate her existence. More importantly, she didn't want her children exposed to the same level of intrusion she had seen her cousins endure. Zara knew that with titles came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came pressure. And pressure, as history had shown, could break even the strongest of royals. But the conversation didn't end there. In fact, it intensified. Charles, determined to stabilize the crown's public image, made a personal appeal. He reportedly told Zara that the monarchy needed trusted blood, now more than ever. The Sussex title, he explained, could not remain vacant, not after everything it had represented in recent years. The public needed to see that the crown was not abandoning its legacy, but reasserting it with clarity. Zara's hesitation wasn't about prestige, it was about control. She knew that the moment she accepted, her life would change. Appearances, engagements, responsibilities, they would all come, slowly but surely. And the media, always hungry for contrast and conflict, would inevitably compare her every move to Meghan's. It wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be comfortable. But it might be necessary. Those closest to Zara say the turning point came during a quiet weekend at her home in Gackham Park. There, surrounded by her family and away from the cameras, she weighed the responsibility of stepping into a role she had never sought, but perhaps now was being called to fulfill. Mike, her husband, reportedly told her, "You'd be doing it your way. No palace protocol, no pretending. Just be you." And that was the key. Zara would accept the title, but on her terms. She met privately with King Charles. The conversation, by all accounts, was frank and warm. She laid out her conditions. She would not engage in ceremonial pageantry for the sake of image. She would not allow the title to overshadow her family life. And she would continue her equestrian and philanthropic work independently. In return, she would agree to assume the title of Duchess of Sussex, restore its public dignity, and participate in key royal events where her presence would symbolize unity, continuity, and strength. The king agreed. It was a quiet agreement, one not heralded with immediate press releases or interviews. But the palace machinery moved swiftly. Within weeks, internal documentation was prepared. Letters patent were drafted. Legal advisors were consulted. The process had begun. When the decision was finally made public, it came through a formal statement from Buckingham Palace. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, in her wisdom and grace, appointed the title of Duchess of Sussex to her grandson Prince Henry upon his marriage. In light of evolving circumstances, His Majesty King Charles III, with full confidence and affection, has conferred the title of Duchess of Sussex upon Zara Tindall, in acknowledgement of her unwavering service to the crown and the nation. The reaction was immediate. Royal commentators lauded the move as a masterstroke of strategy, replacing the most controversial duchess in modern memory with the monarchy's most trusted non-titled royal. The media, always hungry for contrast, ran headlines like, "From Hollywood to horsepower. The crown's new duchess, and Zara rewrites the Sussex story." But beyond the spin, there was substance. Zara's acceptance of the title sent a powerful message, not just to the public, but to the rest of the royal family. It reminded everyone that loyalty, humility, and service still mattered, that it was possible to be a royal without theatrics, that redemption didn't require reinvention, just reliability. And for Zara herself, the change was subtle but meaningful. She didn't move into a palace. She didn't hire a press team. She didn't rebrand. But she did begin attending more royal events, representing the crown at ceremonies, quietly stepping into the space Meghan had once occupied, but without spectacle. The crown had traded chaos for calm, scandal for steadiness, noise for nuance, and it had done so by turning not to outsiders, but inward, to the very heart of the family. Zara Tindall had never needed a title to prove her worth. But in accepting one, she reminded the world what royal duty truly looks like. The decision to offer Zara Tindall the title of Duchess of Sussex did not come from a formal royal announcement or a grand, orchestrated affair. No cameras rolled, no courtiers fanned out glossy statements to the press. Instead, the entire course of the monarchy shifted direction in the most royal of ways. Behind closed doors, in the remote stillness of Balmoral Castle, with only a select few present, and every word carefully chosen. Balmoral had always been more than just a royal residence. Nestled in the Scottish Highlands, it was Queen Elizabeth's sanctuary, her personal retreat, where formalities gave way to family. It was where the Queen truly reigned in private, walking her dogs, riding horses, sharing quiet teas with her children and grandchildren. But now, under King Charles, the ancient stone estate was becoming something else, a royal war room. In early spring, before any public statement was made about the fate of the Sussex title, Charles summoned a private gathering at Balmoral. Those invited were few in number, but monumental in influence: Princess and Prince William, Queen Camilla, and Zara Tindall. The agenda was shrouded in secrecy, with only a handful of senior aides even aware that such a meeting was taking place. Zara herself had not been told the true purpose of the meeting until she arrived. She assumed it was a routine family discussion, perhaps about the upcoming summer engagements or adjustments to the patronage lists. But as soon as she entered the wood-paneled drawing room and saw the lineup of attendees, she knew this was something far more serious. According to palace insiders with knowledge of the meeting, the atmosphere in the room was tense but deliberate. King Charles, never one to mince words in private, opened with a candid assessment of the monarchy's public standing. The Queen's death had triggered a wave of public nostalgia, yes, but that glow was fading fast. The institution was under pressure to evolve, not just in messaging, but in substance. Too much had been lost: trust, credibility, and internal cohesion. And central to that loss, Charles admitted, was the debacle surrounding the Sussex title. The past several years had taken their toll on the family. The Sussexes' highly publicized exit, followed by explosive interviews, commercial ventures, and public grievances, had transformed a royal title into a symbol of division. The monarchy, Charles confessed, had failed to act swiftly enough. They had underestimated the media firestorm, and worse, they had overestimated the potential for reconciliation. Now, however, they had an opportunity to reclaim what was lost. The king turned to Zara with a solemn gaze and said what she never expected to hear: "We need your help." Zara, according to those present, was silent for several moments. She wasn't someone who enjoyed being at the center of dramatic family shifts. She was pragmatic, emotionally grounded, and protective of her independence. She didn't like manipulation, and she hated politics. And yet, she understood exactly what her uncle was asking. He wasn't just asking her to take on a title. He was asking her to shoulder the weight of an entire royal course correction. Princess, and never one to coddle emotions, backed her brother's plea with her own matter-of-fact assessment. She reminded Zara that while she had lived most of her adult life outside the formal structure of the monarchy, her influence inside the family had always been undeniable. "You've done more for this family by staying out of the spotlight," and reportedly said, "than some have done by staying in it." William, too, spoke up. His relationship with Zara had always been strong. They shared a similar sense of humor, a grounded view of the world, and a bond forged through family holidays and shared responsibility. He reassured her that accepting the title wouldn't mean becoming a puppet of the palace. It wouldn't mean sacrificing her children's privacy or abandoning her work. It would mean becoming something the monarchy desperately lacked: a relatable, trusted voice at a time of transition. Queen Camilla's presence in the meeting was quieter, but no less strategic. She didn't speak at length, but when she did, it was pointed. She had lived through the wrath of public opinion. She knew what it meant to be painted as a villain, misunderstood, and sidelined. And perhaps because of that, she saw in Zara a chance to reframe a narrative before it spiraled again. Zara listened, not just to their words, but to what they weren't saying aloud. She could see the exhaustion on her uncle's face, the weight of a fractured family, the fragility of a crown trying to hold itself together in a modern world that no longer bowed to bloodlines. She could hear the hesitation in William's voice, his desire to lead the next generation, but his uncertainty over who, beyond Catherine, he could truly trust. And she could sense in her mother's tone the rare gravity of a woman who rarely asked anyone for anything. Zara, though never drawn to titles, was fiercely loyal to her family, and that loyalty pulled her into contemplation. What if accepting the title wasn't about becoming a duchess, but about becoming a bridge? What if she could restore dignity to a role that had been ridiculed, mocked, and commercialized? What if she could model a kind of royal presence that wasn't flashy or media-hungry, but steady, purposeful, and authentically modern? Still, she had questions. Tough ones. Would she be expected to change her lifestyle? Would her children be drawn into the public eye? What protection would she have from the press? Would this be permanent or a temporary repair? Could she set boundaries that would be respected, not just in theory, but in practice? King Charles, to his credit, was prepared. He presented Zara with a draft of a proposed framework for her role, nothing rigid, nothing ceremonial. She would be granted the Duchess of Sussex title formally, but she would not be asked to relocate, change her daily life, or abandon her equestrian career. Instead, she would be invited to serve as a royal ambassador in select engagements that suited her interests: children's welfare, sports, disability inclusion, and mental health. Importantly, she would not be beholden to full-time royal protocols. There would be no permanent security detail unless required for specific events. No press schedule. No public speeches unless she chose to give them. It was, in short, a royal role reimagined. Zara asked for time. She didn't want to make a decision clouded by emotion or family pressure. King Charles respected that. He reminded her there was no deadline, but that the longer the Sussex title remained in limbo, the more damage it could do to the monarchy's cohesion. That evening, after the meeting, Zara walked the grounds of Balmoral alone. The castle's history surrounded her, walls that had seen monarchs mourn, generations evolve, and scandals unfold. Somewhere inside, her grandmother had once watched over her with quiet pride. That memory weighed heavily now. By morning, her decision was made. In a private follow-up meeting with the king, Zara said yes, but with a caveat. She would accept the title not to replace Meghan, not to spite anyone, and certainly not to become a media darling. She would accept it only if it could be used to restore faith in the institution, promote meaningful causes, and bring peace to a name that had become a symbol of royal dysfunction. King Charles agreed. What followed was a cascade of administrative actions: legal drafts, quiet consultations with the College of Arms, internal briefings to prepare other family members, and palace aides, all under a veil of silence so thick that even seasoned royal reporters couldn't sniff it out. The public would know soon enough. But first, the family needed to absorb what had just happened. Zara Tindall, the woman who had spent her life on the periphery of royal life by choice, was stepping into the very heart of it, armed not with ego, but purpose. And the monarchy, in its quiet desperation, had just found an unlikely savior in a woman who never wanted the job to begin with. The halls of Montecito, once alive with the buzz of possibility, felt different now. More still, more guarded. Something had shifted in Meghan Markle's world, and even her closest allies were beginning to sense it. Behind the manicured hedges, the perfectly framed Zoom calls, and the carefully curated Instagram moments, the truth was quietly taking root. She was no longer part of the story. For Meghan, isolation wasn't just about physical distance from the palace. It was psychological, emotional. It was the dawning realization that no matter how powerful her voice was in the media, or how carefully she crafted her public narrative, the center of royal gravity was slowly pulling away from her. And she could feel it. The decision by King Charles to formally revoke Meghan's symbolic inclusion in royal matters had struck deeper than most knew. To the world, Meghan had long claimed to be finished with the firm. She had moved on, created her own brand, her own media empire, her own identity. But beneath the declarations of independence and reinvention, there had always been a quiet assumption that the door to royal association would remain cracked open, even if only by legacy. That door had now been slammed shut. And worse, Someone else had walked through it. Zara Tindall's quiet acceptance of the Sussex title sent shockwaves through every layer of Meghan's life. It wasn't just a symbolic blow, it was personal. A title that Meghan had built, suffered for, and defended in interviews, legal documents, and global headlines was now being worn by a woman who had never chased it. And the contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Meghan had spent years under the glare of the press, scrutinized for everything from her wardrobe to her words, Zara had maintained a graceful invisibility. There were no tabloid takedowns, no leaked family texts, no late-night talk show barbs, just the steady, quiet dignity of someone who had never asked for attention and was now being rewarded with trust. To Meghan, this was the ultimate betrayal. Not because Zara had done anything wrong, but because it proved the royal family had made their choice. And it wasn't her. The silence from Buckingham Palace only deepened the sting. There was no explanation, no acknowledgement, no formal thank you for her past service. Just a slow erasure. Her name began to disappear from internal planning lists. Her portrait was removed from a digital gallery of working royals. Invitations stopped arriving. Patronages she once championed were quietly redirected. The Sussex Foundation, once envisioned as a bridge between Meghan's activism and her royal heritage, was forced to recalibrate. Major donors began to question the organization's identity. Without royal status, what exactly was it? A celebrity charity? A media project? A brand? And then there was the issue of public perception. Meghan had worked hard to control her image. Every interview, every appearance, every statement was a calculated move to reshape the narrative. She wasn't just a duchess. She was a survivor, a modern woman standing up to an antiquated institution. But with Zara's rise, that narrative began to unravel. The media didn't just compare the two women, they contrasted them. Where Meghan had been outspoken, Zara was reserved. Where Meghan had battled headlines, Zara had flown under them. Where Meghan had demanded space and control, Zara had humbly accepted a role with parameters. The implication was cruel, but clear. This is how a duchess should behave. And that hurt more than anything else. Inside Montecito, Meghan's circle grew smaller. Friends who had once been eager to support her found themselves in an awkward position. Some had long advised her to pull back, to stop engaging with the palace, to let go of the title and all it represented. Others believed she had been wronged, that she should speak out, launch a counter-campaign, reveal the full story behind the split. But Meghan was paralyzed, not by fear, but by exhaustion. The years of interviews, lawsuits, speeches, and subtle battles had taken their toll. She had burned bridges, fought wars, and still lost the one thing she couldn't reclaim: relevance in the institution that gave her platform its foundation. For Prince Harry, the toll was just as devastating. He had stood by Meghan through everything, every slight, every scandal, every sleepless night of anxiety. But now, for the first time, there was a rift between them that even love couldn't easily close. He still had ties to the family, memories, loyalties he didn't want to admit. The idea that his cousin Zara, a woman he had once considered more of a sister than a cousin, was now being lifted in place of his wife cut deeper than he expected. He didn't blame Zara, but he couldn't ignore the symbolism. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do. Harry had burned his leverage long ago. The interviews, the memoir, the tell-alls, each one had widened the chasm between him and the family. And while the British press continued to bait him into a response, he remained silent. There was nothing left to say. Meghan, too, grew quieter. Publicly, she remained polished. There were appearances at charity galas, Zoom calls with nonprofits, occasional product collaborations. But the energy was different. Her speeches became less personal, her smiles more rehearsed. The fire that had once driven her to challenge the monarchy now flickered under the weight of loss. Because this was loss, not of a title or a role, but of a purpose she had tied herself to for years. There was a moment, weeks after the title reassignment, when Meghan sat with a friend in her sun-drenched kitchen, sipping tea in silence. The friend asked her, gently, "Do you ever regret it?" Meghan didn't answer at first. She stared out the window, watching birds flit through the trees. Finally, she said, "I regret thinking I could change them. I regret not seeing that they would change me instead." That sentence hung in the air like smoke, fragile, haunting, and impossible to grasp. Behind the walls of Buckingham Palace, there was no celebration. The reassignment of the Sussex title wasn't framed as a victory. It was a reset, a quiet attempt to turn the page on a chapter that had cost the monarchy dearly. But outside those walls, in California, the effects were seismic. Meghan wasn't just isolated from the crown. She was adrift, no longer royal, not quite Hollywood, somewhere in between. A liminal space where power, identity, and purpose all blurred. Her advisors began pushing new strategies, rebranding efforts, perhaps a podcast relaunch, a docuseries about female leadership, a fashion line, but none of it landed with the same impact. The public was shifting, the curiosity had waned, and the story that once captivated the world was now being rewritten without her. She had always said she didn't need the title, that it didn't define her, and maybe it didn't, but losing it, watching it handed to someone else without so much as a goodbye, that left a mark. Not because it proved she wasn't royal, but because it confirmed she was no longer wanted by the very institution she had once tried to change. And in that knowledge, isolation bloomed, not as a punishment, but as the echo of a door that was finally, truly closed. For many watching from the outside, it seemed as though King Charles had led the charge in reclaiming the Sussex title and reshaping the future of the monarchy. But those paying closer attention understood something deeper. The fingerprints of Prince William were all over the move. It wasn't brash. It wasn't loud. But it was deliberate. Quietly, strategically, Prince William had become the architect of a royal recalibration, one aimed at saving the institution not just from scandal, but from itself. William's relationship with his brother had been strained for years. What began as small disagreements, choices of staff, timing of announcements, overlapping engagements, gradually festered into full-blown animosity after Harry and Meghan's exit. Though the brothers had once shared the tightest of bonds, walking side by side behind their mother's coffin as children, adulthood brought different visions of the world and of the family business they were born into. Harry wanted freedom. William wanted continuity. And the split between those two desires would end up dividing not just the brothers, but the entire royal household. In the years following Megxit, William had watched as headlines unfolded daily. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the memoir. And though the monarchy maintained its silence publicly, William was seething behind palace walls. Not because of what Harry had said, though that hurt, but because of what it had done. The damage, the confusion, the erosion of public trust. He didn't hate his brother, but he deeply resented the way he believed Harry had weaponized their family story for personal gain. And while King Charles tried to maintain a neutral posture, William had begun taking a more proactive role behind the scenes. Sources close to Kensington Palace say that William was the first to float the idea of reassessing the Sussex title, not as punishment, but as a necessary evolution. It wasn't a vindictive campaign. It was a calculated effort to pull the institution back from the brink. William saw the Sussex title as a liability. It had been turned into a platform for grievances, a lightning rod for criticism, and a walking contradiction to the monarchy's code of quiet duty. More importantly, William feared that if the monarchy did nothing, the silence would be interpreted as consent. He began having quiet conversations with senior courtiers, framing the conversation not around family drama but around the future of the crown. How, he asked, could they promote values like unity and service while allowing a title so closely associated with royal dysfunction to continue circulating in public life? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand action, but he was relentless in his logic. And Charles listened. Though the king was cautious, always the pragmatist, he recognized that William was not speaking as a wounded brother, but as the future monarch. William wasn't acting on impulse. He was thinking in decades. And in that long view, the monarchy had to clean house. Not for revenge, but for survival. The final nudge came in a moment of unintended honesty. At a small, private dinner held at Highgrove, intended to be a low-key family evening, Charles reportedly asked William, in a moment of candor, what he thought would happen if the Sussex title remained as it was. William's response was quiet but firm. Then we are inviting a legacy of confusion, he said. And confusion is the crown's worst enemy. That single sentence, according to one senior aide, cut through everything. After that evening, the plan began to crystallize. William didn't dictate Zara's appointment. He didn't need to. but he was deeply supportive of it. He recognized in Zara someone who could reset the narrative without igniting controversy. She was trustworthy, respected, and above all, not interested in fame. Her acceptance would speak volumes, not through headlines, but through her very nature. But while William played the long game behind the scenes, the emotional cost was steep. Privately, he missed his brother. Not the version on streaming services and press tours, but the brother who used to make him laugh uncontrollably at Balmoral. The one who stood by him during the darkest chapters of their lives. The one who shared a language of grief only they understood. But reconciliation now felt impossible. Every olive branch had been torched by another soundbite. Every path forward littered with accusations and mistrust. The divide wasn't just personal anymore. It was institutional. And that's what made William double down. For the Prince of Wales, the monarchy wasn't a relic to be admired from a distance. It was his destiny. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for the role. He knew that to preserve it, he had to act, even if it meant alienating his own brother permanently. His relationship with Zara, however, remained strong. In fact, some believe it was William's encouragement that helped Zara find the confidence to accept the Duchess title. He offered reassurance, logistical support, and perhaps most importantly, moral clarity. He told her that what she was doing mattered, that it would help repair something broken. And Zara believed him. In the weeks leading up to the official transition, William coordinated closely with the palace communications team. He helped design the messaging strategy. He advised against sensationalism and insisted that the change be presented not as a replacement, but as a realignment. It wasn't about erasing Meghan. It was about elevating the institution. But even William's best intentions couldn't shield him from criticism. Once the news broke, several tabloids ran stories alleging that William had forced the king's hand, that he had masterminded the title's reassignment as part of a long-simmering feud with Meghan. Some media outlets accused him of being cold, calculating, even jealous. Commentators across the Atlantic, particularly in the U.S., painted him as the villain in a transatlantic royal drama. Inside Kensington Palace, the response was stoic. William didn't engage with the stories. He didn't issue rebuttals. He simply carried on, meeting with charities, attending engagements, fulfilling duties. His silence, while infuriating to some, was intentional. It was the royal way. And it stood in contrast to Harry and Meghan's tendency to defend, explain, and fight back. But that silence didn't mean William didn't feel the weight of his actions. Those closest to him say he carried the decision like a stone in his pocket, always present, always heavy. He believed it was the right move. But that didn't make it painless. There was one moment, weeks after the transition, that stood out. William was attending a charity event for bereaved children, a cause close to his heart. After the event, he spoke quietly with a young boy who had recently lost his brother. The boy asked him, without pretense, "Do you miss your brother too?" William paused. He looked the child in the eye and said, "Every day." And then he walked away. That sentence never made it to the press. It was never quoted, never broadcast. But it summed up everything: the human cost behind the royal machinery, the sadness beneath the strategy. In the grand chessboard of the monarchy, William had moved decisively. He had helped remove a piece that no longer served the crown and had helped position one that might. But the cost was personal. The crown had gained a duchess, but William had lost a brother. Still, he stood by the decision. Because for him, the monarchy wasn't just a family business. It was a calling. And in the face of chaos, distraction, and public skepticism, he had chosen duty over sentiment, even if it broke his heart in the process. The announcement hadn't even been out for 24 hours before the media frenzy ignited like dry tinder in a summer wind. The moment Buckingham Palace confirmed that Zara Tindall would be assuming the title of Duchess of Sussex, a title that, until recently, had been synonymous with Meghan Markle, the press erupted. What followed was not a measured reaction, but a storm. Headlines blazed, talk shows spiraled, hashtags trended, and royal commentators came out swinging from every corner of the globe. To the British press, this was the juiciest royal pivot since Megxit. It wasn't just a personnel shift, it was a public reckoning. Zara, long seen as the crown's low-key MVP, had stepped into a spotlight she never sought, and in doing so, redefined what it meant to be a duchess in the modern age. Meanwhile, Meghan, once the glamour magnet of royal life, found herself sidelined entirely, her influence waning with each passing cycle of breaking news. Within hours, UK tabloids were flooded with dramatic front pages. Zara crowned, screamed one. Megxit finalized, read another. And perhaps the most provocative, Sussex restored. The subtext was impossible to miss. This wasn't just a reassignment. This was a correction, a cleansing of a title tainted by controversy and now reborn in respectability. Television news anchors debated the move with breathless fervor. Morning programs featured royal experts debating the implications. Piers Morgan, never one to pass up an opportunity to take aim at Meghan, dedicated an entire segment to what he called the Duchess do-over. "Now this is what a real Duchess looks like," he said, gesturing to a photo of Zara riding horses with children. Not a reality TV drama queen. Across social media, the reaction split sharply. On platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok, users either rallied behind Zara with admiration or accused the monarchy of erasure and racism. The hashtags #DuchessZara, #Zara of Sussex, #Royal Revenge, and #Meghan Deserve Better all trended simultaneously, creating a virtual battleground of opinions. Supporters of Meghan saw the move as a final slap in the face, a deliberate replacement meant to humiliate her on a global stage. Influencers, celebrities, and activists posted statements accusing the royal family of systemic bias and hypocrisy. One particularly viral tweet read, "Meghan fought for change. Zara was handed her legacy. There's your royal justice." But those sympathetic to the royal institution pushed back hard. They argued that Meghan had walked away, that she had monetized the title, abandoned the role, and used her royal connections for personal gain. Zara, they said, represented everything Meghan rejected: quiet service, family loyalty, and a life outside the spotlight. The debate spilled onto talk shows. In the United States, outlets like The View, Good Morning America, and CBS Mornings dissected the announcement from every angle.